knowing who Jesus is. Last week when I was talking to you guys, we talked about who Jesus really wasn't. He's not a genie. He's not a BFF. He's not a, what were some of the other ones that you remember through there? They got genetic Jesus. That was my Jesus growing up. But we all have these misconceptions of who Jesus is, and we put them in our head, and that's kind of what we think. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go to week 1 on our website, and you can catch up, and you can watch that series. But this week, we're going to start really just diving into who Jesus is and what the Bible says. In Mark chapter 10, I think we're going to see something pretty cool about Jesus. And I'm going to start at verse 32, and I'm going to read to about 45 to give us some context today. It says this, and they were on the road. It's talking about the disciples and some people that were following Jesus. And they were all on the road. They were going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them. They were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. And taking the 12 again, he began to tell them what was about to happen to him, saying, "Look, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him. But after 3 days, he will rise again." You know what's cool right here, and I want you to get this for a moment in the sermon. In this first opening part that we see, Jesus is foretelling his death. And what he does right here, which is so cool, is he's going to tell people the gospel. Right there in the 2 of 3 verses, he sums up what the gospel is. That Jesus loved you so much that he went and got himself delivered into the hands of these priests and these scribes who condemned him to death, but it was only to pay the price for our sin. Come on, somebody. And that we could have eternity, he sacrificed his life. Man, right there, Jesus is telling them the gospel, the good news. And it says, "And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, 'Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you.'" Could you imagine telling Jesus that? I want you to do whatever I'm about to tell you to do. I mean, come on. You must not know who this guy really is. And he said to him, "Well, what do you want me to do for you?" I could just only imagine Jesus kind of grinning right there. "What you want from me?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." Jesus said, "You don't know what you're asking." Sometimes we pray for things that we don't really know what we're asking for. Sometimes we don't realize an answered prayer comes with a big price. It says this, Jesus said, "You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? Or you be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they said to him, "We are able." Yes, we can do it. And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I'm baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those whom it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. This is just hilarious to me. And Jesus called them to him and said to him, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them." What Jesus is trying to tell you, do you realize the pride that these officials have? Do you realize how they want people to bow before them and to serve them and feed them power? But he says this, "But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Today I want to talk to you from this title. If you're taking notes, which I hope that you are, you can write this down. Live to serve. Live to serve. I don't know what it is with this idea and this fascination of sitting in like high priority chairs. I remember the first time I was ever going on a plane, my first time riding a plane, and it was one of those economy planes, didn't even have first class yet. in this plane. And I'm like getting into the plane and I'm walking in. I'm like, good Lord, they pack you in this thing like sardines. Like, man, I was a small kid and I barely had any room next to me. It doesn't seem that it's made for the average size of a human being. And if you ever flew before, you know what I'm talking about, because you don't even get that much room to like lay your seat back. But when you do, you're already in the other person's personal space behind you. You're just compacted in there. And I remember riding on a plane not too long after that, and like, here we go, because I'm weird about people like right up in my face and stuff like that. I know some of you might be like that too. Just so like the space thing. Now, I love people, and my wife can attest to this. If a stranger's sitting by me, we're best friends by the end of the flight. I would get to know their whole life story. I'm that kind of person. But I hope it's a guy about my size, or not. But anyways, I remember walking into this plane, and like when I first got in there, I'm like looking at the seats, and they're like by themselves. They got a cup holder. I'm like, well, I'm gonna love this plane. I'm like looking at the seats and checking it out, and then all of a sudden I go through this like corridor, and they're packed in again. I'm like, wait, why can't I sit over here? I was too young to realize there was a thing called first class, you could sit in. And if you sit in first class, you got to pay a little bit more of a high dollar. And it's crazy. People will pay a high dollar to sit in first class to have their space, or to just kind of be like, hey, what's up? I'm in first class. You go to the back of the plane and sit with everybody else. Or what about like when you see a car? And you're with your friends. What's the word you're going to yell? It's something about sitting in the front seat. You're like, shotgun. You're going to yell it, and you're going to try to get it. It's something about sitting in the front seat. Matter of fact, it's so funny. One of my best friends, me and my wife had been married for a few years, and she finally got to meet my friend Jeremy, and he always does that. He'll go outside, and he's the rules. Like, first person to see the car, yell. Well, the first time he ever does it, he yells, shotgun, and Leah just kind of laughs, and she gets to the front door. He literally just went, boom, I yelled shotgun, and made her sit in the back, and I laughed. I loved it. And still to this day, they fight about that, and they do that every time they see the car. Or what about our church? Our church is starting to grow, and we're starting to see, and I see regulars every Sunday, and you're starting to get your spot. You are. You starting to get your spot, and you walking over there, and if somebody comes in and they beat you to church and they get in your spot, you're going to be like, well, you just don't know. That's my spot. Well, what's it about being in church? It should be you sit wherever. But I mean, even when I went to James River in Springfield, Missouri, where we were at, it's like it was a 3,500 seat auditorium, but we still had like our section. It's like where we were sitting at, man. And it felt weird. Like one time I sat with another friend, like on the complete opposite part of the auditorium, and it just felt weird. It didn't feel right, man. We prioritize so much about like where we sit or your couch. Come on, man. The first time I ever bought our couch and we brought it home, I claimed the spot. And we got like a L couch or whatever, one of those things, and a sectional. And I claimed one spot of it when we first moved in. I'm like, this is my spot. Some of you men have those recliners, and that's my spot right there, man. We prioritize sitting. I think we're people of habit, and we love to have our place to sit. It's something about it. I don't understand it, but that's just how it is. And it's interesting that even in biblical times, it had something to do about sitting in a certain spot. Sitting right there in a spot. And James and John, look what they said in 35. He says, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, they came up to him. This is just from the passage we read. It says, teacher, we want you to do for whatever you ask for us. Jesus says, what do you want to do? And the next part says, we want to sit at your right hand, at your left hand in glory. Now, let me tell you something. When we read this from the surface context, what we're thinking about is, they want to sit with him in heaven. But that's actually not the case. You see, James and John didn't realize that Jesus was coming to set a spiritual kingdom into place. They thought he was coming to throw over the Roman Empire and set a physical kingdom into place. So when they're asking for a seat at the right and the left hand, they're thinking like literally, earthly, like Jesus was about to wipe them all out. He was going to be the high king. They wanted to sit right there and get power and feed them power and get the grapes. That's how they thought of it. Like, man, I'm going to get to sit at the right hand. I want to sit right there by you. It's going to be nice. It's going to be comfortable. Everybody's going to see me up there, man. Let me tell you something. It's going to be so cool to be like that, but I read this passage and I think about it like that. And I want you to catch this, because this is kind of where I'm going with this entire sermon is, Jesus, remember what Jesus said when I started this passage in Mark 10? He was talking about the gospel. He was talking about how he was about to go and get betrayed and get beat and get mocked and get killed for the sake of other people so that you could have eternal life. But all James and John could talk about is where they're going to sit in all of this. You catching that? Here we see the character of Jesus who's all about other people, but yet James and John can only think about where they're going to sit in all of this. Where am I going to be in all of this? And it's the nature, I think, that we naturally have is to be selfish. A lot of times that's why marriages fall apart. It's just because of pridefulness and selfishness in the marriage. It's like that's what's first. We want people to see me. I want to see how I'm successful and that I'm sitting at this right spot and that I'm doing this and I'm doing that. But let me tell you something that's only going to give you temporary fulfillment. Jesus was a servant. And last week we talked about reaching out like that lady who had that blood disease, and she's walking and there's a crowd around Jesus and he's walking, and she just got through the crowd just to reach out and grab him. Everybody else, they stand around observing Jesus, but only one person was willing to reach out. And I told you, if you would be willing to reach out, you start understanding the real Jesus, and the real Jesus was a servant. He came on this earth not to be served, not to sit in a high place of honor, but to go to a grave to honor you. Man, society teaches us to chase positions. It's like, unless you don't have a high position, you don't have any power. So I've got to have the most money, got to have a bigger house than other people, I've got to have this, and it's got something about this society. And the higher we go with society, the more entitled we get. And that's what starts to happen, and we like, man, we deserve to. I bet James and John's like, man, we've seen you do this, Jesus. We've seen you do that. I've been walking with you through this. I deserve a seat at that right hand. I deserve a seat at that left hand. I want to be recognized right now. Man, Jesus had another lesson for him right there. His response, check out his response to James and John. We read it a while ago, but Jesus said to them, you don't even know what you're asking for. And you're able to drink of the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism which I'm baptized. And they said to him, we are able, we're going to do that. And the cup that I'll drink, but it says, look at the part I underlined for you, but to sit at my right hand or my left hand is not mine to grant. You see, what Jesus is trying to tell James and John right here is that, look, what you're asking is not even my issue right here. You see, what you're trying to do is you're trying to focus on your right. See, Jesus was too preoccupied and focused about others and his responsibility that he wasn't worried about his right. James and John were worried about their right. There's a difference between your right and your responsibility. Did you know that? I believe in our world today, we're trying to be more right than more responsible. And that's why we have this madness and division going around our country, and those things kind of happen. It's because we're entitled and we want to be more right, and it's just deriving from that root of selfishness and that pridefulness that's going out. And it's coming out into everybody, and so it's like we have the protests that are going on, and I don't even think most protests today, a lot of them are great, but a lot of them are just up there to be entitled and be right. It's like it's not even, and a lot of people will go up there and hold a sign, but what are you doing to make a difference about what you're doing, other than just holding a sign? Are you doing something to take responsibility and be someone? Like the whole issue with race. It's that you can go and hold a sign and tell people about equal rights, but how are you treating the other gender? How are you treating the other race, the ethnicity? Is it something that you're showing love to? It's your responsibility as someone who loves Jesus and follows Jesus to treat all people equal, no matter their political affiliation. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of hearing about, the leftists, the liberals, and they're just, they got their own beliefs. I understand it. And rights, they got their own beliefs. But guess what? Jesus doesn't look at the lefts and think they're no better than the rights. At all. He looks at everybody equal and gives everybody a chance to know his name and to be transformed. And that's why I think as when we begin to serve others and we stop focusing on our right, it's our responsibility to be like Jesus and to serve other people. No matter their background, no matter what the coolest thing that I could ever see is someone who has a lot of wealth serve someone who's homeless. How incredible is that? Or when you see it flip-flop. Do you ever seen the videos where I saw this one video where this homeless guy was given $20, but then he saw someone in need, and he went and gave that $20 to someone you could tell was well off, just didn't have her card or something at the time? And it's like, wow. Man, if everybody would have that heart to just serve others, this world would be a greater place. And that's because the world was meant for Jesus. Man, I see this, and I look at this, and as Christ followers, it's not our right, but it's our responsibility to be different. Not to be served, but to serve. And you know why? We are different in order to make a difference. And you're like, I just don't know how I can make a difference. There's so much chaos out there. Don't know what I can do. Start by serving one. Start by serving one. If we all started serving one, then guess what happens? Things will just start to happen naturally. I mean, the trunk or treat that we did last night, that was no strings attached, free professional pictures for a lot of families that probably can't afford stuff like that. We had the lights set up for them. It was cool because you've seen people from all these different ethnicities. You've seen people that were probably all political, different backgrounds. But guess what? We were all having a good time, loving each other, and serving. And I think that's what the world was always meant for when Jesus had that plan. And you go running through Facebook nowadays, and Christians, you can even see people who claim to be Christian in the comment threads acting stuck up and more right about something instead of just serving and loving people. And that's what we see. I know this is a tough message to hear for some of us, and it gets down, but man, I want to get down to the heart of Jesus. I want to be more like him. Ephesians 5:1 says to be imitators of God and do as he does. We can never be perfect like God, but man, I can do my best to be like him, to use those same characteristics. So from the passage, I have a few thoughts on how we can be more like Jesus and choose to serve others versus ourselves. Y'all ready for this? A few things for you. This first one is this idea between sitting versus serving. Sitting versus serving. You see, James and John, they were all about, where do I sit in all of this? Where can I sit down? Where can I have this? I want to be at your right hand. They were worried about sitting. Jesus was preoccupied with serving. Catch that. If I'm going to be more like Jesus, I got to stop being more worried about where I'm sitting and how I'm getting recognized, and I need to be more worried about serving people. That's where I've got to come from, because think about it. When you're sitting, say you like sitting for dinner, you're doing what? You're eating for you. Think about when you're sitting at school. Maybe you're a teenager in here, you're sitting in school, what you're doing. What you should be doing is sitting to learn for you. For you. I mean, even when we're sitting in here right now, you came into church, you're sitting to learn about Jesus for who? For you. I mean, you think about it, even when you go sit in that comfy chair, guys, that recliner you got, man, you kick back, you're relaxing for you. Go Saints, they're going to win today. You're sitting for you. I mean, I can't think of many times that you sit down where it's for other people. See, serving is something that you're in action. It's not something that you're sitting down doing. And man, it feels good. Like for James and John, it feels good. They want to feel powerful. They want to feel honored. They want to feel recognized. But man, it's the total opposite with Jesus. And look, I get it. We should honor one another. It should be reciprocal. Like last night when we got in a circle, I wanted to recognize all the people that put such a hard work into the trunk or treat and stuff. But that's not what it's all about. Not at all. And it's about what we did on that night and serving other people. Man, it was so cool to see that touch. And man, I think that there's this word that happens when you start to learn to live a life of serving and you're in action and you're not sitting down. What happens is you begin to see favor. Look at your neighbor and say favor. You ever seen someone in life that just seemed to have all things always clicking for them? And they were probably someone who went to church and loved the Lord and stuff, and they just had to sing this favor. It was funny. In college, I had this roommate, or he was a suite mate of mine, and so I'm this puny white kid, and like my hall that I was on, I sat down with. I was at the end of this hallway, and it was literally a whole hallway was all the football players. It's like my suite mates were like the running back and the defensive end at the college, and the guys across the hall was the captain. He was the safety and stuff, and I became really good friends with them. But I thought of it, I was like, all right, how can a puny white kid get in with the football crew? Because I could do this. And what I did, no lie, is I went and bought a ton of Debbie, used my parents' money to buy a ton of Debbie cakes and snacks, and I filled up this, one of those plastic bins, and I just left my door open. Told them, hey, guys, anytime y'all want to come in. Also had the, I was previously saving up money for an ex-girlfriend to get engaged, and we broke it off, and I bought a big screen TV. So, come on, somebody. That's how you... And I took the big screen TV with me. It was a 55-inch, and so I had a big screen in this little bitty dorm, and I had all these snacks, and I left the door open. And I'd be coming home from hanging out with Leah, and I got like 8 guys in my room hanging out watching TV, but it was just serving them, and things would happen. And one day, one of those guys, the captain that was the safety, he looks at me, he's like, I can't remember what happened, but I remember him telling me, like, man, things always going right for you. You just seem to like have this, man, I ain't never seen someone have favor on your life like that. What does that come from? And at the time, I didn't know. I was just trying to love like Jesus. And I'm not trying to put myself on because trust me, I've been selfish. There's been fights that me and my wife have had that was all my fault because I was too worried about me. But if you put intentionality behind your serving, people will recognize it. Most of all, I think God sees it and plants favor in your life. It just happens naturally. Matter of fact, Psalm 90:17 tells us that. It says, let the favor of the Lord, our God, be upon us and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the what? The work of our hands. When I'm working with my hands, when I'm serving other people, then guess what? Naturally, favor follows me. Favor comes on my life, and you might be wondering, why never things happen good to me? It might just be because you're sitting too much. Maybe it's time to stand up, use your hands, and as I serve with my hands, the Lord's favor will be upon my life. You see, society thinks of favor as status. I mean, if we weren't saved or we didn't know Jesus, who we think that has favor are the celebrities that, are making millions and doing that kind of things, and I don't ever bash it. I love entertainment. Me and my wife, we're like professional moviegoers. We have this thing called AMC A-List. We pay $20 a month, and we see like 3 movies a week. Not even lying, and it's incredible. So we've even, I don't know if I should say this from stage. You see her bag right there? Just think. We could have a full course meal. Professional moviegoers. And so I'm not doing anything. I love the entertainment industry. But think about it. I mean, a lot of times we think of favor as, man, they got all that. But how many celebrities do we hear about all the time taking their life or going to rehab? It doesn't. I mean, it's only temporary. That kind of fat power and that kind of that honor, that success, it's only temporary, man. And what you see, society thinks that's favor, but what favor is what happens in your life when you're serving, when Jesus is behind it. When you got that loan that you shouldn't have got. When you got that promotion you shouldn't have got. When you got that parking spot in the first row that you shouldn't have got. I call that pastor favor. Man, I'm telling you, it's favor that follows your life. And you know what favor does, man? I can see favor on our church. It's been incredible to see the kind of the growth that we're starting to have and people getting plugged in. And I see favor on the church, and I see growth. I see life change. I get to read praise reports. God, this is so cool. I get to read praise reports every week about what God's doing, and it encourages me so much. And we have a great reputation in our community. You can ask like the mayor and city officials, they know us because we're in our community, because we're serving. And you can start to see favor on our church like that. But we don't do the favor so we can say, look at us. No. We have the favor to say, look at him. Look at what he's doing. Man, God is so good. He's so great. Man, I think about that, and I think about Paul. And Paul tells us in Colossians 3:23-24, because, we can be about others and we can serve, but what's your attitude behind it? Paul tells us, whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You're serving the Lord Christ. See, what Paul is telling you is that whatever you do, in any way you do it with everything you got. You give 110%. Guess what that means? Even at work. You show up on time. You being a good employee. You get along with other coworkers, even though they might drive you up a wall. You do those things because you're different. You do those things not, your performance is not unto your boss. Your performance is unto the Lord. Well, I'm serving. Hey, let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you something that will get you in good places in any workplace that you're at. If you're working somewhere and you're like, man, I've been trying to maybe move up. Well, if you're showing up late to work all the time and you're not honoring the people above you, then guess what? You might not see that. But watch, do this. Start doing everything as from the Lord's point of view, serving them, honoring them, being on time, doing your work. And guess what? Favor is going to follow you all the way up. It just happens naturally. Everything I do. You know where serving should start at, though? Serving should start in the home. Come on, man, when you see that sink full of dishes, how hard is it to walk over there? Or teenagers, man, what about you? Living off your parents' dime, making a mess in your room. You got to help out sometime. You see a thing full of dishes, man, you go and do that. You see that garbage bag's full, man, you go take the garbage bag, you go take it out. You clean up your room. Let me tell you something, serving starts in the home. It simply starts in the home. How are you serving your wife? How are you serving your husband? It starts right there. If you're only serving outside of your home, then it could be a potentially meaning that all you're doing is serving to be seen. If I'm not serving in my home and I'm serving outside, then am I truly even having the right motive behind my heart? Am I serving at my home? And look, when you serve, you can't be grumpy about it. Look, we had this guy one time. I ain't going to say his name, but we were doing this event called Burgers and Blankets. He doesn't go to our church anymore. But we were doing this event called Burgers and Blankets, and it was such a cool opportunity. If you don't know what that is, we basically, for a month, everybody brings in new blankets, and then I go to McDonald's and order like 100 McDoubles, and we go out to the homeless in downtown, and we hand out burgers and blankets in January. And it's a simple act of loving on the community, loving on these people, and we get to pray with people and stuff. It's really cool. And we did something like that. But we were doing this event, and one of our volunteers overheard this guy say this. He said, they were like, so you going to that event tonight? And he was like, man, I don't really want to, but I probably got to because it's right by my house, so I'm going to have to do it anyways. And when it finally got back to me, I was like, are you kidding me? Man, if that's the heart behind you serving, then you don't really know who Jesus is. Because if you really knew who Jesus was, you couldn't wait to serve. If you really knew who Jesus was, you're looking for opportunity to serve. You're looking to find out a way how you can honor and love on someone. How you're figuring out some kind of way you can potentially serve somebody. Man, it's telling you that it's not the heart of Jesus. Even Psalms 102 tells us, serve the Lord with what? Gladness. Come into his presence with singing. When I serve, I want to serve with gladness. And that's what I loved about the event and all the volunteers that were there last night. I saw smiles on their face, and they were loving every minute of it. And it wasn't anything about recognition. It wasn't anything about me. It was everything about them. Man, I loved that. I'm going to finish this point by saying this. Let me tell you something. Jesus, when your life was saved, he called you to go and make disciples. Jesus didn't save us to sit. Jesus saved you to serve. Simply put. Jesus was the servant, and we should strive to too. We even give you an opportunity and we got like 5 or 6 different teams here. All we ask is you serve one time a month. And I'm telling you something, when you start serving your local church, I think it's the best form of discipleship that can happen in your life, and many of our volunteers can attest to it. Whether you're greeting someone at the front door right here, whether you're out there in the parking team waving at people, whether you're in the kids, watching the kids' room, or the production or the worship, I'm telling you something about serving others. It does something to you. It makes you joyful that you're helping be a part of something so much bigger than yourself, and you see Jesus working in people's lives, and you get to celebrate that. Man, I really, really encourage you, get plugged in. It starts with a welcome party. Go to the welcome party, hear our heart, and watch what God can do when you step out and you start being more like Jesus and serving. There's something about sitting versus serving. I'm not going to sit, I'm going to serve. There's another one right here. It says comfort versus suffering. You see, when you sit down in a chair, it's really what? Comfortable, man. We like comfortable, but sometimes you don't realize what following Jesus may come with. Jesus, look what Jesus, remember when they asked that question, James and John did, back to our passage, our main passage, 38, it says, Jesus said to them, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? You see this word cup, it's like, what is he even talking about? He's talking about his suffering. So he's saying, are you able to suffer like I'm about to suffer? Are you able to go through with that? James and John had no idea what Jesus was truly asking them. He was talking about this cup, and all they could think about was the comfortable person they would be to sit in this right seat or this left seat of honor and praise and power. You see, your flesh loves comfortable. Man, some of you fall asleep on these chairs. I don't even get how it happens. Those chairs aren't that comfortable. But it happens. You get comfortable sitting down. You start to doze off. But, man, the thing about it is, I feel like life is centered sometimes around us feeling comfortable. I can get that job that can make sure I have the right sort. And that's all things that you have to do. I can, it's always about how I can make myself comfortable. How comfortable am I where I'm at and what I'm doing? And that's how it is. But I don't believe that you can't experience God's best in the middle of your comfort zone. Because what happens when you get comfortable, you get complacent. And when you get complacent, you sit. You sit and you consume, and your flesh loves comfortable, but your spirit wants so much more. Your spirit is hungry for so much more than just sitting down. You go, God's created. He's breathed life into you. He's breathed that spirit into you. So there's always a part of you that wants to, but the flesh is strong. There's a part of you that, come on, you can think about it, man, I really want to do that, but it's comfortable right here. So we have this constant fight about fighting our flesh. But your spirit is constantly wanting more and wanting to see something. But I'm going to tell you something. Is it worth risking God's best for your life to just sit in your comfort zone? Or maybe, just maybe, is it willing to take a risk, step outside your comfort zone with a little bit of faith and watch God stretch you so you can become more than you've ever imagined or think? Think about that. Man, I don't know. I think about that, and I think about how we've got to push back comfortable. You know what else is comfortable, though, when we talk about serving? Serving where people can see you. That's pretty comfortable, right? How many of you think about it? We do outreach or we go do something good nowadays, and it's like, selfie, what's up? See me out here. I'm making a difference. It's the kind of world we live in, but Jesus says, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. So what kind of motive are you serving with? Can you go and serve without posting on social media? Yes. Can you go and make a difference for someone's life without telling somebody about how you did that? How is your heart serving behind this? And your flesh screams with service in secret. It does. It screams with service in secret. It's a comfortable thing to do, to get recognized, to feel good. But Jesus, he isn't worried about your flesh and doing good in those moments. What he's worried about is how your spirit is growing. Matt Chandler is a famous pastor in our nation. He said this. He said, comfort is the God of this generation. Therefore, suffering is seen as a problem to be solved rather than a providence from God. It's pretty deep. And I think about that, and I'm like, man, yeah, it's good to feel comfortable. And you know what? It's not fun to suffer. Nobody likes to suffer. I talked about it a few weeks ago when I was answering questions and stuff. I didn't think about that, and it's not fun to suffer at all, and Jesus tells us this. And we can see this through some of the characters in the Bible. That suffering, I know it's hard to tell you this, and it's hard to get, but sometimes, you see, when you sign up to follow Jesus, you sign up to get targeted. Jesus told us that they will hate you in this world, that you're going to face trials and tribulations. Guess what? There's this thing called life, and just because you're a Christian doesn't mean it excludes you from this thing called life. Life still happens, and suffering still happens. It's how you deal with the suffering at that point. You can realize that God never wastes an ounce of your pain. The Bible says that he catches your tears, and he bottles them away, and he never misses a moment to turn your pain into purpose. Never. And what we see we see this with Paul. Paul, if you don't know who Paul was, he was this guy who killed Christians. He felt comfortable. He had this high place of honor. He got to chase after people, Christians, and kill them. He had it made. He had probably all the wealth he wanted and stuff like that until he had that moment on the road to Damascus where he had an encounter with God. And Jesus was talking to Ananias, and he tells Ananias this in Acts 9:15. It says, but the Lord said to him, go, for Paul is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. At first you read that and it's like, how cool is that? Man, this guy who was like high honor and all this cool stuff, now he's going to get to go and speak the gospel in front of kings. Man, he's still going to be up there high dollar. But did you know that every time Paul was sharing the gospel with kings, he was in chains, suffering. He was in prison. He was beaten. And we got it made here, guys. We have the freedom to believe how we want to believe. You ain't never have to worry about someone killing you for your faith. And I just wonder how many people we would actually still step out and say, I could still follow Jesus if I knew that consequences like that could happen. And serving him and suffering. In Acts 9:16, it actually goes on to say this. Jesus said, for I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. Suffering is not fun. I get it. I don't like to suffer. Me and my wife has been open with you. We just went through a miscarriage. It was terrible. Hated it. I don't get it. I don't know why it happened. It was suffering that really stuck with us and hurt us bad. But I always believe that God uses suffering for a reason. He never wastes it. He doesn't cause the suffering. There's sin in this world. But he'll turn your pain into purpose. Don't chase seats of prominence and comfort. Because sometimes your suffering is only setting up someone else's success. You know that? That the suffering you're going through might just be the testimony to tell somebody that will help them find their way back to Jesus. And it's serving other people. Being in that mindset. And to wrap up today, the last thought that I see in this passage is this thought of temporary versus eternal. You see, James and John, they had this thought that they were going to sit in this place of honor and up there, but Jesus tells them, but it shall not be among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant. Whoever would be first among you should be your slave at all, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to what? To give his life as a ransom for many. The reason Jesus did that is because he didn't have temporary on his mind. See, a physical kingdom would have only been temporary. He didn't have that in mind. He had eternity on his mind. The fact that when he would die, when he would go to the grave, and for all those who would believe in his name and repent of their sins, they got to live for eternity in heaven. God's preparing a place for you. You might be suffering now, but one day you're going to be in a place with no more pain, no more tears, no more suffering, a place that God prepared for you, and it's going to be incredible. Man, I love the thought of that right there, that Jesus is always worried about eternity. And what if we shifted our perspective? What if we shifted our perspective to know that if I thought with an eternal perspective rather than a temporary perspective, then I would know that as I'm serving others, it's making a difference, not just for the now, but forever. I think about it like this, and if you came last week and you see me going to the crowd, I don't ever do that, and I'm about to do it again, so I'm not crazy. I don't always do this, but I've got to make a point for you because I was thinking about it. I get in here, and I just got to make a point. You see what we have a door right here, obviously. I mean, you got to be pretty ignorant not to know that. But we got a door right here. The purpose of a door is to open it so I can go through it. Or open it so I can see what's on the other side. You ever peek through? Your parents tell you not to go somewhere and you're like peeking in the door. But it's the purpose of it. But there's only one way that this door can open. Come on, men in the house. What is that? Got the hinges on it, right? Got a few hinges right here. These hinges plays as a role, a purpose to open and close this door. But look how small this piece is. See how small it is? I think about the gospel. I'm sure you're going to like this, man. I think about the gospel, and I think about how when we're serving others and we're showing people Jesus, it's opening the door to the light of the gospel. It's making a way for people to come in and see Jesus. It's making a way for people to see Jesus in your life. And it starts with what? The only way that door is opening is what? If I'm serving, if I'm worried about myself, guess what? Door stays shut. It's going to stay shut. But if I start serving others and I start worrying about what other people and serving those people and doing things to make a difference, guess what? That door starts to open. People start to see the light of the gospel through you. It's just like with us, I declare to never be a church that would just be in these four walls, but that we would be a church that serves, that swings these doors wide open, and then people could see the light of the gospel. Look, Jesus says, I am the door, and if you come through me, you will experience life. Guess what? We got to open the door. We got to serve others and open the door. We got to make it happen. And I want to make a pact with you right here, right now, that for as long as I live, I'm going to be here in New Orleans serving other people. And I just want to see some people who are behind me who want to say, hey, let's serve some people in this place. Let's see God do some incredible things. Let's open that door wide open and let's watch them come in. And let's God begin to see restoration happen in people's lives. Let's begin to see marriages restored. Let's begin to see bondages broken in the name of Jesus, man. You see, God, I love charities. I do. I love charities like the Hearts for Humanity and Red Cross and the Ronald McDonald House. They're all doing incredible work. But there's a difference between them and the church. You know why? Because what they're doing is for the now. But what we're doing is for forever. It's for eternity. It's got an eternal perspective in mind. So what can you do to serve? Well, we give you opportunities here to get plugged in. You can do that. So you can start serving on Sundays, one Sunday a month to serve and make a difference. Or what else? We do outreaches frequently. Get plugged in on outreach, make a difference. What else could you do? Serve at your house. Men, come on. I know that couch is comfortable. How can you help your wife out who's been watching those kids all day? I know you've been working all day, but you've been called to be the man of the house. You do that. How can you, ladies, serve your husband? And when you start focusing on each other, watch how much your marriage will get better. Man, how else can you start serving? Serving for others, not for yourself. Get out the chair and see God do something more. You want to know who Jesus was? This week you learned something. Jesus was a servant. He came not to be served, but to serve others. Let me tell you something. All these other religions and all these other things that happen in this world, they will, that we think is like Christianity, but which one's the right one? Because they got all these ones in around. But if you study a lot of the other ones and stuff, it's always what you can do for the God. How you can work yourself way to be accepted by them. Christianity is the only way where you see a God who worked for you. You don't have to work your way up to him. He already did it for you when he died on the cross and he was raised again. And guess what? Now all you do is believe in him and have faith in that. It's nothing about you working around. If you think it's about works, then it's just legalistic. It's not about what I can do wrong or right. Now, God knows the motive of your heart. Don't take that and be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go do what I want and be back at church Sunday and say, God, forgive me. No, God knows the motive of your heart. He understands who you are. And I'm going to tell you something. When you're changed by Jesus, you're a redeemed believer. You can't help but want to do righteous things. You can't help but want to serve.